I promise I don't wear black every day. Apparently every Tuesday I just wear black though. Last week I showed you two methods on how to record yourself at home. One was me playing and singing at the same time, and then one I played guitar separately and then sang over it. And this week I'm going to show you how to mix and master those recordings. Mixing is when you take all the pieces, the vocals, guitar, drum, and start shaping where they sit together. It's kind of like painting with sound. You're carving out space for everything so it doesn't overpower each other. Once the mix feels right, that's where mastering comes in. Mastering is like the polish or the glue for every song. You want to make sure that every track sounds balanced on every speaker, your car, your phone, headphones. With mastering, it's not about making something loud, it's about making something complete. Now I'm going to show you how I actually do all of that. First thing I did was solo the vocal and throw on an EQ. I added a little high shelf at around 9K for that air, that open top end that makes it feel alive. Then I cleaned up the low end with a high pass filter at about 100 Hertz to get rid of any unnecessary rumble. After that, I dipped some of those muddy low mids around 250 Hertz just to clear things up, and then gave it a small boost at 2K for intelligibility. It helps the words cut through without sounding harsh. And honestly, that's pretty much it for the vocal EQ. Next up in the chain is a compressor. I like to add compression after EQ, so I'm taming the dynamics of a clean signal. I threw it into auto mode. That gives me nice transparent compression without coloring the tone too much. Then I pulled down the threshold until I was getting a good balance between gain reduction and dynamics. I usually aim for around -5 dB of reduction on vocals, just enough to keep them pinned and up front in the mix. The ratio is kind of sitting at a 2:1, where it keeps everything sounding natural instead of squashed. And I turned on auto gain so it compensates for the lost volume automatically. Now for the guitar, it's a pretty similar process. You want to start with EQ and roll off the low end, but this time I high passed around 75 Hertz since I still want a little bit of that low end warmth to come through. Then I cut some of that boxiness again around 250 Hertz, added a bit of shimmer at 9K with a high shelf, and a touch of clarity at 4K for the string definition. I finished it off with a subtle low-end bump to give more body and warmth to the track. For compression, it's the same idea, full auto mode. You want to watch for a nice amount of gain reduction, about -3 dB for strumming heavy guitars like this. Finally, I added a limiter at the end of the guitar chain just to catch any of the big strums that might spike too high. I do that often. That way, the master bus limiter doesn't have to work overtime later on. For the second round of recording, I basically copied the exact same vocal chain over. I barely had to change anything for this one. The only tweak I made was adding a little more top end with the EQ and backing off the compression slightly. Otherwise, it was the same exact setup. Same goes for the guitar, honestly. I copied the chain from the first take, I fixed the limiter setting I accidentally left on from before, and I lowered the limiter ceiling just a bit so it hit less harshly. Once everything felt balanced, I did a few small fader moves, mainly pulling the vocals down a hair so they sat better in the mix. Then I jumped to the mix bus for some gentle, transparent processing. I started with an EQ, boosted the lows around 150 Hz by about 1 dB for a little warmth. I added a high shelf at 10K, also about 1 dB to bring in some air, and carved out a tiny bit around 500 Hz for a negative 0.5 dB to clean up that common mid-range buildup you hear in a lot of tracks. Then I added a compressor, same auto mode, light 2:1 ratio. I barely touched it. I'm only going for 1 to 2 dB of gain reduction here since it's acoustic and I want that to feel natural still. Finally, I added a limiter to bring everything up to level. Streaming standards sit around negative 14 LUFS these days, but I don't stick to that too rigidly. For acoustic songs like this, negative 12 LUFS usually hits that sweet spot, loud enough to sound consistent next to other tracks, but still dynamic and alive. I increased the input gain into the limiter so it could gently clamp down on peaks and lift the overall loudness, but I kept it subtle, around 2 to 3 dB of gain reduction max. You don't want your limiter to do the heavy lifting because that usually means something went wrong earlier in your mix. Once I got the track sitting comfortably around negative 12 LUFS on the meter, that was basically it. Everything sounded smooth, open, and balanced, and if it was an actual song, it would be ready to be released. That's pretty much the whole mix and master breakdown for this one. It's nothing too wild, and honestly, it's not that hard. Like I said in my last video, there's plenty of free options. This was Studio One, but there is like Ableton Live and there's Reaper. There's plenty of free DAW options out there that you can do this yourself at home. There's GarageBand. So don't feel discouraged because you don't have this specific piece of software. There's plenty of options out there that you can use. If you like this behind the scenes content, hit the like button or leave a comment saying what you liked and if you would like me to do more. Don't forget to go check me out over on Instagram and TikTok for more covers, original music, and behind the scenes content. Next week we're going to talk about songwriting again. I've wrote almost the entirety of the album, so I just want to recap and give you a couple demos of the songs I've written so far. And then after that I will be recording all of them, and then we'll be in the end game pretty much. I can't believe we're halfway through this challenge already. I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult, but I've actually really enjoyed writing this album, and I'm really excited for everyone to hear it. And with that, I'll see you next time.